Right then, good morning everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you're all doing well. So for today's 4PS Construct webinar, we're going to be taking a look at project control and elements. As you may know, I'm Adam and I'm part of the 4PS account management team. And I'm joined here this morning by our pre-sales manager for 4PS, Richard Vernon. I'll pass you over to Rich in just a second to take you through the agenda for this morning. But first, just a bit of housekeeping. So if you've been on any of our webinars before, you know that we ask that you direct any questions to me after the webinar. This just helps us to save some time and make sure that we don't overrun. So I'll stick my contact details up on the screen at the end of today's presentation. So feel free to give me a call or an email with any questions that you might have. Also, as per usual, we will be recording this morning's session, which will be available for you to view on our website in the very near future. And all in all, we're looking for this webinar to last around 30 minutes. So if you're all set, Rich, I'll hand over to you and we'll get going.
Okay, thanks, Adam. So today we're talking about elements within 4PS. And to start off, really, this is the agenda we're proposing. So we're going to define what these elements are. It might be a new concept to a lot of you. We're going to go through a quick overview of the elements and how they look in 4PS. We're going to talk about a thing called standard elements and show you where those are created in 4PS. And we're going to look about showing you elements within projects in 4PS and within estimating in 4PS. And after that, we're going to try and describe to you what we feel are the business benefits of using elements. Okay, so a definition of elements. Now, you might be familiar with a very sort of traditional way of project costing, which is to take groups of costs. So we take labour or materials, for example, and then break those down. So your labour might be broken down into project managers, electrical workers, and, you know, all the different types of labour that you might have. Your materials might be broken down into aggregates, wiring, control units, all the usual sort of cost objects, as we call them in 4PS. And that is a fantastic way of analysing cost across a company. So if you want to look at control systems or project managers or anything like that, and you want to see what you've spent or what you've budgeted for or where you are at the moment with any of those particular types of costs, you can look across all your projects and you can see where you are. And that's great. That's a great way of doing that analysis. However, it does lack something within a project itself. So if you've got a project and you've got a structure to that project, it's all right saying, for example, that you're halfway through spending your money on project management, but it'd be really nice to see how much of that project management is split across different elements of that project. So that might be the start, the phase one of the project has a certain amount of project management associated with it. Phase two has another element of project management associated with it. And so you're getting a sort of more rounded idea of where you are in the project if you can divide the costing down and the revenue down to these things called elements, which will represent the work breakdown structure of a project. They're generally activity-based. We'll show in a moment a couple of different examples of how elements can look. And they can be highly detailed, so it can be right down to the sort of granular level of your work breakdown structure, or they can be super high level. So you might just have one or two elements that you're controlling within the project, and we'll show you some examples of that as well. The other thing to note is that they can be standard or unique. So you can create a standard set of elements that you use across all your projects. The idea of that is that if you have a lot of repeatable work that is structured in a very similar way, what you can do if you're using standard elements is then you can analyse costs across the entire business, a bit like you can with the cost objects, where you're looking at, say, project management costs or control panel costs. But you can look at different phases of projects or different elements of the work breakdown structure, but then across the business as well as within a particular project. And obviously that only really works if you've got a consistent set of these elements across all your different projects. So they can be standard. More typically, I would say, they're unique to individual projects. So somebody will go in, create a project and say, right, we want to analyse this by a particular work breakdown structure. And then we'll then flesh out that work breakdown structure and then use that within that particular project or collection of projects. You can actually choose as you're going through 4PS which projects that you use elements on. So it doesn't have to be all of them. You don't have to turn it on and you're bound to use them for every project. You can choose the both whether you use elements or not and how detailed those elements are on a project by project basis. Okay, so some examples of an element structure. This one here is a kind of very construction type one, like a building one, which is based around project activities. So you can see at the top, you've got your construction of the office building. That is then broken down into a structure of project management, building, systems engineering and safety. And you can see under, for example, building is then broken down, foundations, building finishes, and then foundations is broken down into excavation and concrete, etc., etc. Now, this is a good structure for illustrating the fact that you see the numbers you have before those items. You do create in 4PS a structure that your elements will follow. And the idea of that structure is that you can then roll cost up. So if you want to see, for example, under building, that 1.2 will actually roll up all the costs for 1.2.1, 1.2.1.1, etc., going through that particular structure. And we'll come to that and show you that in a second as well in the actual product. Okay, this is another example, which is almost the complete opposite end. So this is very, very simple. So M&E contractors might take projects and they might want to analyze that particular project by the mechanical side and the electrical side. Now, you can do this obviously by using sub-projects. So you can have your main project, which is your project, and then you can have a mechanical sub-project or an electrical sub-project. And that's fine, that works really well, but there are certain advantages to doing that. If you've got different people working on the different projects, that can be useful for setting up things like approvals. However, if you want to control it all within one project, you've got the similar or same people working on that project. You want, for example, to do applications on that one project, but you still want the breakdown by mechanical and electrical. You can use a structure like this, and then within the one project, you can see the breakdown by those particular elements. This third example is a location-based one. So it's kind of activity, but it's more based on location. So you can see you've got sort of building A floor 1, building A floor 2, building B floor 1, and atrium. So different subsets of the project, if you like, that you could analyze the project by as we're going through. This one here is an example of a breakdown by technology. So this one here is using electrical, heating, and data, and the electrical is broken down by lighting, fire alarms, that type of activity as well. So what we're trying to show here is some sort of typical examples that we see from our customers of the types of breakdowns they have. And like I said, they can be very, very basic, or they can be really granular. You can go right down to, right down to the bottom of a very detailed hierarchy if you choose to do so. Okay, so where are these things used once you get these elements going, once you've chosen to use them and you've got them set up? Well, they're used within a project and then almost everywhere that you're posting. So if you're doing, for example, within procurement, you're posting orders. If you're posting an order to a project and you identify that the elements are mandatory for this particular project, then whenever you're doing a posting, we'll ask you for the project code. Once it's got that project code, it will then ask you which element is this project code for. So is it for mechanical? Is it for electrical? And if you set it to be mandatory, then you can't actually post the transaction until you've actually set that element against it to keep it nice and consistent. And again, as you would imagine, your posting timesheets would be a very good example of where you might select your project and then you might say which element of the project it is you've been working on. Obviously, you can set the element within the budget so that you can compare the actuals as they come through to budgeted costs against element as well as by cost object. So you can see it, and we'll show you that in a moment as well. But another couple of areas where they're interesting is in project progress. So if you know 4PS, project progress is a way of it's like your internal identification, if you like, of the progress of a particular project. And again, you can set that progress at element level. Also forecasting. So forecasting is where you're saying, here's where the project is, here's where it's going in terms of costs or hours, that type of thing. And you can identify that breakdown by element as well as by the more traditional cost object. So we'll show you that as well as we're going through. Now, we mentioned that you can put elements against budgets, but obviously within 4PS, you can feed your budget directly from the estimate within 4PS. And of course, you can use elements within estimates so that they feed automatically through to that particular budget. And we're going to talk about a bit later how we break that down, because it could be that you use standard elements for that within the estimate. But additionally, you can use a unique project element structure as well within the element, and we'll show you how you can do that. Goes without saying, as you'd imagine, when you're putting variations through 4PS, a very important function within a project is posting variations and putting variations into the system. And of course, you can create and use elements for those particular variations as well. As well as what we've kind of shown you, where we've shown you kind of mechanical, electrical, we've shown you the breakdown. You can put additional bits of information against these elements. So you can hold dates against them, and you can hold a thing called features. Features like a user-defined field that you can create against a particular element. Show a couple of examples as we're going. And just to re-emphasize, these elements have a hierarchical structure that you can see as you're posting through. So the first bit of demo that I'm going to go into is just to really give you a feel for the elements within a project, and then we'll go into some of the other details as we go through. So I'm going to do this a lot today, flip between my remote desktop, and where I've landed here is within a particular project. So if you look in the top left here, I've got my solar paneling project for a particular customer within 4PS. This is a standard project card with all the fields available. Now, if I click on elements, you can see here that I've actually created a particular structure against those elements. So you can see I've got my Highfield solar project, and then underneath it I've got my groundworks, further down my solar tables, my electrical hookup, and my site management. And within those particular sections, I've got things like site preparation, site clearance. So you can see the roll-up. The roll-up is going to roll up through that particular hierarchy from the lower levels to the top. And you can see on this one, I've simply got some starting dates and ending dates recorded against the project, which is shown here at the top. You can record those starting dates and ending dates at all the levels within this particular structure. Now, we'll come on to that later. Is that for project planning? Well, we've got lots of things to do with planning with 4PS. This, I think, is really just identifying for reference particular dates that you can store against elements, but we can go into a bit more of that in a separate webinar. Okay, if I come out of that element breakdown, that's okay in itself, but what I want to show you is the project control screen. So for guys that are familiar with 4PS, the project control screen is the screen where we pull together lots of costs, lots of revenues. It's kind of like the heart of the product, really. And you can see here I've got some fields that are opened up: contract values, budgeted values, open purchase orders, sub orders, received values, accrued, actuals, that type of thing. I can choose an awful lot of columns in here. So again, for those not familiar with 4PS, this is a really comprehensive breakdown of a project that you can view within the system. Okay. Now, the structure of this screen as it stands is that it's broken down by our major kind of cost areas: labour, materials, subcontracting, plant, sundries, and revenue. Okay, and at the moment I've got labour highlighted, so you can see that it's broken down into supervisors and general labour in this bottom section of the screen down here. If I click on materials, it gives you a nice breakdown by materials. These are material subheadings, again, all user defined. And again, by subcontracting, I've got different types of subcontracting. So now that's lovely. I can see my general labour subcontracting. I can see kind of what's my budgeted value for that. That's come through from the project budget. I can see my open values, my actual cost of 50,000. That's all lovely. What's really nice about this element structure of 4PS is that I can click on the element button at the top, and it's a bit like a Rubik's Cube. It will rejig that particular view that I've got there and actually show it by that element structure that I've just been looking at. So you can see actually your budgeted values against things like site preparation, piling, paneling, that kind of thing. So it's breaking down the structure of the project by the elements and just immediately giving you the view by elements. So that's essentially what the elements give you. They give you the same view of projects, but twisted around to show it to you in a different structure. Okay, so back to the traditional view and close that down. Okay, so that's just a flavour of the elements. I'm going to drop my desktop there and go back into the PowerPoint. Sorry. Okay, so the standard element side, as I said, they can be reused across many projects and estimates. So if you're the type of company that does a lot of similar type of work, then these might be great for you because you might be able to have that additional bit of analysis that's really useful of being able to look across the company at element level. So breaking it down a bit like I've just done with the project control. And again, if you're familiar with 4PS, you know that project control screen is available across all projects. You see a list of projects down the left-hand side, and then you see all those columns going across. If you're using the standard element, you could then do a similar thing where you see all your projects down the left-hand side, but then you have an element structure built into it as well, so you can see the consistency going across. Now, standard elements are set up in the system. Okay, we'll come out here, and if I go down to departments and functional management under projects, have a look under the general tab. You can see a thing here called elements. Okay, I'll go into elements here. This is setting up a set of elements that you can reuse throughout the system. So whenever you use this particular structure, if you're using 6D.10.00, it is going to come up by default as preliminaries. And it's quite handy because when you're creating the element structure, you can either copy through the standard element structure automatically, or if you're selecting individual rows, when you actually look these up rather than actually having to key them in. And so you set them up in that standard element section under the functional management and the general in there. Once you've done that, if you go into a project and you don't have an element structure set up, you can either copy it through. So we'll just take a random project here. And if I go into the elements, in there, what it does for you, the standard elements allow you to do a lookup here. So you can see you can pick out preliminaries from that list and use it within that element structure. I've got one that already exists, so it's going to not let me. So, okay. So standard elements are good if you have consistency across all your projects. Okay. So within a project, what I want to do now is I just want to demonstrate some of the features of elements around what we've already seen. So we've seen it, the view in project control. I'm just going to have a look at some of the other bits and pieces around elements so you can get an idea of some of the other uses of them in the system. Okay. If I go back to my remote desktop, I'll just nip out of that project and nip back to my solar paneling project down here. Okay, some of the fields that are important on this front screen. When I come down here into the budget section, you can see here I've got forecast per element. Okay, if that is ticked, when I actually do my forecast process within 4PS, it's going to structure my forecast by element rather than by cost object, which is the default way that it structures the forecast. In addition, the progress, where you're measuring your internal view of progress of the project, you can select here that that's going to be done by different levels. It can be element cost object, budget line, and cost object. So if you do it by element cost object, again, you're going to get a structure that looks like your elements, then with your cost object structure beneath it in the hierarchy. Another important field is down here, posting element mandatory. If that is ticked, then you can't process a transaction against this particular project without entering the element. And there's a very good argument to say, if you're going to use elements, turn that on, because it forces the users to use elements, and you don't end up with postings going into the structure that have an unidentified element to them because the user didn't key one in. So if you turn that on, when the processing like the timesheets or the orders or that type of thing happens, then the element will be asked for in the system. Okay, and if we take a look at one of those, we'll take a look at progress, for example. If I go up here to the progress icon, and I've got this progress for this particular project here, solar paneling. So progress is, again, like I say, where we're viewing a project and we're saying how far through the project do we think we are internally. Not necessarily an external view of the project. There's other places in 4PS for that. It's your kind of internal view. If you look at the top here, and I go record progress percentage by element, you can see at the moment we don't think we've gone anywhere, so the project hasn't got off the ground yet. If I record progress per element, I might edit that list there and say if I take some of these elements here, so if I go and say we're 25% of the way through that, and we're 50% of the way through that, and if I click OK, you can see the effect. It's updated all the individual lines. Now, of course, there's nothing stopping you going through and taking every single line and updating your progress for every single line within this, and that's perfectly fine. People may need that level of analysis. What that record progress per element does, just allows you, if you want to do it at a more broad brush level, so you want to do it at a higher level than the absolute detail that you're recording elements for, you can actually record it at a higher level and have it update all the individual lines for you. And you can, just out of interest, record progress for the whole project. So we'll go in there and click and say we're halfway through the project. It will update all the progress lines as 50% as we go through. So that's where elements, you can see on the left-hand side here, come into the progress screen. And likewise, if I come out of here and go into a forecast screen, so the forecast is different to the progress. The forecast is where you're saying, this is where we're at in terms of cost and revenue, and this is where we think the project is going to go to. Now, 4PS has a number of different ways of doing that. You can do it where it's almost like a cost to complete. So you're just saying, this is where we're at now, this is where the project is going to end up. Or you can also do that in the same way, but break it down by period. So you can say, okay, we're going to spend this amount much on labour, on a particular type of labour, and it's going to be spread out over the project. So we're going to spend, 100 hours next month, and 150 hours the following month, 200 hours a month after that. So there's different ways of doing the forecasting. This one I'm doing at the moment is based around the cost to complete. So we'll go into the forecasting screen. I've got my project number up here. I've got my forecast date. It's a detailed forecast. Again, for those that know 4PS, you can do a rough forecast, which is basically just highlight details. It saves you having to go into the detail if that's not appropriate for the type of project. Perhaps the project is small, doesn't require that level of analysis. But detailed forecasts are the common way of doing it, where you're looking at details within the actual forecast. Now, if you remember on the screen before, on the project setup screen, we identified that for this particular project, we're going to forecast at the element level. And again, it's optional per project. And if I go into the cost screen at the top by hitting the cost button, for example, you can see now I've got my elements. It's broken down by element because of that setting. What I can go is I can go through my forecast and I can modify my forecast at the element level. So £1,600 on site preparation. You can drill in, change those figures if you need to, and roll it up to the element level. Okay, so this is the forecast and the elements appearing within the forecast. Okay, right back out of there. I want to also show you guys, I'm going to come out of the project completely and go to the estimating side, 4PS, go into my estimates. That we've got a solar paneling estimate that was used for this project. Within that particular estimate, I've got a structure that may have been estimated on a structure. So it's slightly different to the estimate structure, or the element structure, I should say. In this case, this is perhaps the way the customer wanted to structure the quotation for this particular project. But if I go into a line in there, you can see that the element is also available. Now, by default, that will be the standard element. So if you create an element, if you create an estimate that isn't linked to a project, you'll get the standard elements when you search in that particular screen. However, if you, on the estimate header, you come down and select a project code, once that project code is selected, you can then estimate the element structure that you prescribed for that particular project. And you might say, but whoa, when we're doing an estimate, we don't have a project at this point in time. But don't forget, within 4PS, you do have the ability to create projects with a status of estimation, which means they're not fully fledged projects yet. They're not live projects. They're still at the estimate stage. And when you've got a project at the estimation level, you can build the element structure for it and then use that element structure within the estimate, which will be great. If then you win the project, you copy the budget through for that particular project from the estimate, and it will actually have the element structure built into it already. Okay, it will just save time later on. You can, of course, do the estimate without the element structure, copy it into the budget, and then break it down once it's in the budget into the element structure that you want. But again, if you do that, that's fine. It just means you're almost re-engineering the budget afterwards, which again might be the appropriate way to do it. But you don't necessarily have to do it that way. You can capture the element at an earlier stage if you wish to. Okay, so back over to here. We've done our standard elements, so we're good for that. And the business benefits. What would be the point of doing all this? Well, I'm kind of hoping that it's a little bit sort of obvious on this one. It's the cost of report production. So if you're doing this kind of analysis, but you're just using a system to monitor cost at the sort of cost object level, so your labour, materials, subcontractor, that type of level, it may be that you're taking that information out and then re-engineering it on a regular basis, maybe even doing this on a monthly basis to fit in with an element structure. And of course, if you've got that built into the system, you're going to save an awful lot of time. So report production is going to be less manual and it's going to be automatically in the system. So at any point in time, you can check a project out, look at it in this traditional way, but then flip the view to look by element. And all your Power BI reporting or business intelligence, any management reporting can hook into this element structure as well if you need to. And of course, the benefit of all that is it's a lot faster. You've got immediate reporting. You don't have to do any processing or manual intervention. Of course, manual intervention means potential for errors, potential for weeks going by before the information is made available. Here, it's immediately available in the system. We hope this gives you a bit of competitive advantage. And in one big way of that is that you've got this immediate view. So if you're not actually looking at your projects at the moment, using an element structure as you go through them, we're hoping this will allow you to have a greater depth of analysis of your project. So as I said before, you can easily see that you've used up half of your subcontract labour budget in terms of hours or amount. That's great. If you can then look at that and say, well, actually, we've used up half our subcontract labour hours, but at this particular, in phase one, we've only 25% completed it. The phase two isn't complete at all, and it gives you a much richer feel for where you actually are in that project and to highlight risks in that project at a much earlier stage than waiting for the budget to run out and then realising that you're not far through the project. Now, I'm absolutely positive you're all doing that kind of analysis at some level, but it may be that it's more manual and it's more outside the system, whereas we're trying to say here this can happen within the system, which gives you better financial management of the project, hopefully a lot less risk within the project as well. Okay, so that was the main highlights of what I wanted to show on project elements. And again, before we go, I'm just going to go back very quickly to that one view, because it really highlights what it is that we're showing within this particular webinar. If I go back to my project, I can look at the project control. And I'm looking at it in a traditional way. But if I'm using elements, I can flip it on its head and straight away see the same information broken down into the structure that you're after. And again, that can be a much detailed level. So we've got our element structure here. Something I didn't mention earlier on, that element structure is definable. So in this particular demo system, it's 6 digits split into 3 sections, but you do actually, when you're configuring the system in the project setup, you define that particular structure. So it could be, 2 levels, 4 digits and 2 digits, or it could be 8 digits long, it could be 10 digits long. You build that structure when you first configure the system. So this view can be high level, it can be extremely detailed, and it gives you that just fast ability to capture the information at the right time within the system. Okay, Adam, I think I'm. Did you want to take over at this point in time?
Yeah, sure. Okay, cool. Nice one. Thank you for that, Rich. So I hope you all found that interesting and useful. So as I mentioned earlier, if you've got any questions, I'll send you over an email with all my contact details. I'm more than happy to help you out with anything that you've seen this morning. So yeah, just look out for that. Also, keep an eye out for emails coming up over the next couple of weeks with a schedule for our next upcoming webinars that we've got coming in. They'll also be up on the website, so if you take a look around there, I'm sure you'll find them, along with previous webinars that we've ran on the videos tab. Also, look out for some emails that are coming out about our upcoming customer day on the 13th of November. It's shaping up to be a really good event, so I highly recommend that you take a look on the website for more information on that. Once again, thank you for being with us this morning. Thank you for your time. Have a great day, and we'll see you again very soon. Cheers.